Добрий день. Розпочинаємо роботу в Українському кризовому медіа-центрі. Наша перша тема.
In UCMC, our first topic is the report about the red tape and the bureaucratic hindrances on the way to meet the needs of refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants in Ukraine. Our speakers are Noel, Calhoun, Deputy Representative of the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Yusuf, Kurkchi, First Deputy Minister for Temporary Occupied Territories and Internally Displaced Persons in Ukraine, Natalia Naumenko, Director of the Department for Foreigners and Stateless Persons in the State Migration Services.
This morning. I want to talk today about some research that we have just published as UNHCR, our annual Participatory Assessment report. First of all, I want to talk about why we do a participatory assessment. There are a number of people agencies that are involved in supporting IDPs and refugees, that is government, civil society, and international organizations. And every year as we're deciding what we should be doing, we take a pause to listen, and to listen to ordinary people, how they see their problems, and how they see their solutions. Let me start with saying it's not easy. It's not easy emotionally, because when you listen to people, they tell you their problems. They tell you their frustrations. Sometimes they're angry at you because they see that you have the power to make things better and you haven't done your job in the way that they expect. How do we listen? We conduct focus group discussions. Now, we were just talking about the fact that in the context of preparing this report, we carried out 176 focus group discussions, which is a lot. But we're talking to people all around the country. We're talking together between government, civil society, and the UN, and with IDPs and with refugees and asylum seekers. What happens at these focus group discussions? Sometimes people cry. Sometimes they get angry. But there's always a dialogue, and a dialogue that, when it goes well, is constructive and helps us to come up with solutions for how we can work together better to solve the problems of IDPs and refugees. Now, when you read this report, as I hope you will, you might come away, and I know you all are news agencies, so I'm worried about this. You might come away with the feeling that there is no news. And really that's the sad fact, is that, and this is how people perceive it, is that nothing has improved for them over these past years. So they're going into, for IDPs, their 4th year of displacement, and they're still talking about access to housing. They're still talking about employment. They're still talking about challenges in access to government services. So the news is that these problems still exist, but on top of them, there is another layer. There is a layer of frustration, of disappointment, and sometimes even despair. And that's compounded by the fact that a lot of people feel like nobody wants to listen anymore, because there's nothing has changed. I want to mention, before I let the other colleagues speak, about 3 of the main issues that we heard from IDPs and refugees in the context of doing this participatory assessment. First is housing. Housing is a big issue, and I would divide between the people who live along the line of contact and others. Like, along the line of contact, what do we hear from people? First of all, we hear that throughout 2017, on average, every week, between 40 and 60 houses are damaged as a result of shelling. It's ongoing, it's relentless, and people continue to suffer. What we heard a lot of also along the line of contact is the frustration with the military's occupation of civilian housing. It's clear that sometimes there's military necessity and the army has to requisition people's houses to use for military purposes. That's very regrettable, and it brings a lot of risk, because if military is in a residential area, then that area is going to get shelled by the other side. When it happens, though, and when it's necessary, then people need a predictable way that they can get compensation, well, at least for the electricity that the military uses while that they're living in the family's house, but also for any damage that might be caused. So the people are asking, we heard them saying, is they want a clear procedure, a simple procedure that would allow them to protect their homes. What do we hear from IDPs and refugees? I mean, it's a main problem of affordable housing. IDPs speak about living in crowded conditions. They speak about challenges in getting the subsidies for utilities that are available. And they call for access to social housing for those who are very vulnerable. They call for low-interest loans so that they can help themselves to get out of their situation and get back on their feet. The situation for refugees, Natalia will talk about it, it's even more difficult because for IDPs, there is a monthly assistance in the initial period to help people get back on their feet. This doesn't exist for refugees. There's limited temporary accommodation that is available in the country, though we hope that a new center will open in Kiev Oblast and make more spaces available for asylum seekers and refugees. A second topic is access to social services. This one is a major topic. If you go and sit and listen to IDPs, you're going to hear a lot about the verification exercises that have been conducted over the last really 18 months to check up on whether IDPs are continue to be eligible for social services and for pensions. Now, the main tool that is used to conduct verification is a home visit. What does that mean? That means it's a big organizational challenge. Ukraine is a very big country. People live all over the place and often in quite distant areas. So for the departments of social protection to conduct home visits, they have to get transport, they have to go out and find these people. It takes a long time. I would say it's also awfully costly for the government of Ukraine to conduct these verifications. In the meantime, people's benefits are suspended until they have been verified, so meaning that these often very vulnerable people go for months without receiving their assistance pending the home visit. And what do they do when they're waiting for a home visit? They have to sit at home. They complain about this a lot because they can't go to work, they can't go to the shops, they can't go on with their regular lives, and they feel very trapped by this procedure. And we heard a lot of frustration about this. They call for simplifying the procedure, applying it more uniformly among different regions of the country, and informing people more clearly about what they have to do to be eligible for their social benefits and pensions. And I would say on the pensions is a particularly painful subject because these are older people, in the main part, these are older people who've worked for years. They feel like they have done their part and they want to receive the pensions that are due to them. But we know that so many people have been cut off. As of the end of 2016, we know that in last year, some 407,000 people lost their pensions because of verification. And we know that that number has continued to increase, reaching nearly like 586,000 in the course of this year. IDP registration, the idea, I mean, and I was working here in 2014, and this is very close to my heart. The idea of IDP registration was to help people to access their social benefits more easily. It was supposed to be a big help to people, and initially it was. But at this point, it seems like the IDP registration is starting to have the opposite effect, starting to make it more difficult for people to access their social benefits and to access their pensions. And if it's getting in the way, if it's getting in the way of people exercising their rights, then it's time to rethink the policy. Now, asylum seekers, they also have face a lot of administrative problems. And we have with us today a colleague, an asylum seeker from Syria, who may be able to share some of his experience. So when you sit to talk to asylum seekers, they know lots of interesting words in Russian and Ukrainian. Документы, довідки, да? Реєстрацію, and so forth, because they spend months and even, unfortunately, as with this colleague, years trying to obtain a legal status in this country. And you know, this is particularly painful when it comes to the situation of Syria, because we're all aware of the horrible war that has engulfed that country over the last 5 years. And in the European Union, we looked at the statistics. You go, and if you're a Syrian and you apply for protection as a refugee, your chances of getting protection are about 95%. Pretty good. In Ukraine last year, your chances were, about 17%. So not at all comparable to international standards. And let me assure you that we're not talking about huge numbers. In the first 6 months of the year, the Migration Service took decisions on about 41 Syrians. So this is the number of like 100 people a year applying for protection in Ukraine. And many of these are Syrians who have had some contact with the country, who speak Russian very well, as I can assure you. Now I want to speak about integration. Let's start with the positive. First of all, lots of IDPs are making huge efforts to integrate. And if you look at the International Organization for Migration does research every 3 to 6 months on they ask the same questions about employment and about poverty rates. And you see, I mean, there are some good numbers, right? We have to bring you some good news, that employment rates slowly by slowly are creeping up, and poverty rates are slowly by slowly going down, but very slowly. People feel, as we talk to them, very uncertain about the future. They want that very elusive sense of stability, normality, and belonging where they are. And one of the elements of belonging, and that will, I think, be a priority as we see the Verkhovna Rada go back into session in the fall, is the right of IDPs to vote in local elections. Now, for refugees on integration, there are also many wonderful stories of people striving to find a new home in Ukraine, despite all of the odds. There are some nice quotations in this study about, for example, people who say things, we're ready to go through all the problems in Ukraine together with the people of Ukraine. We're not afraid of problems. We're not afraid of challenges. We just need the documents that would allow us to live here normally. But I think if you look at what was very painful to read was all of the statements, and in particular they were about children, of the experience of xenophobia or racism toward persons of color. There are many refugees who feel this sense of exclusion. A Sudanese mother who likes Ukraine in many ways, but can't abide the fact that when she goes out with her 3-year-old child, people call him the black boy. Or there's a poor 9-year-old boy in Kiev who says he's afraid to go to school because the children in his class are bullying him and calling him names that I would rather not repeat here, but are related to the color of his skin. Now, we titled the report the title is "We Carry Our Tragedy Inside," and these are the words of an IDP woman who's displaced from Luhansk. She's a woman who understands the very long-term consequences of war, and a woman who is worried about how this war is affecting her internally and also affecting her children. But I would say that a tragedy that we carry inside is a double tragedy, because there is the tragedy of war, but that is compounded by the burden of secrecy, of not being able to talk about the problems that you face. And that is one of the reasons that, despite the news, we have to keep talking. Thanks.
Дякуємо вам. Передаємо слово Юсуфу Kurkchi.
Thank you very much. The floor is given to Yusuf Kurkchi. Good afternoon, good morning. Actually, yesterday I acquainted myself with with the report of our colleagues dealing with the refugees problems. And first of all, I have to confess, speaking about the amount of work, huge work done, I really appreciate what you have done. When you see, you look at it intensively, you'll see that more than 180 target groups in 10 regions of Ukraine, and the person who organized at least one focused a target group, and then deciphered, analyzed the results of that work, he can understand what huge work is behind this report, which is 30 or 40 or 50 pages in all. I understand this is the amount of work which is not possible to devour for the executive bodies, or let's say the law, the authorities in these countries, which have to assess the quality and the quality of the services provided by the government to their citizens. I believe that this report will be of interest not only to our profile ministry, but also to any kind of the executive powers or the authorities. If we are talking about the problems raised in this report, they are the same problems with social protection, medical care, and the let's say the housing, the right to work, and all those things are the systemic problems with the whole country. If we are talking about the access to the high quality medicine in the countryside, it should not depend on your status, or you're the IDP, or you're a citizen. These are not administrative unit. If there is no, let's say the medical care of any level to anybody, it won't be provided to any citizens living in this specific settlement for many years now. So this is no big news, but this is another confirmation of the fact that the assessments were based on the response of our citizens. There are certain things which we have to focus our attention as the reps of this specific ministry. But I can tell you immediately that we won't be able to resolve those all those problems overnight. This is something to do with the situation in this country, with the security issues, etc., etc. So the verification process which takes place in the social protection bodies or in the banking institutions, we can say that they are going to vanish into thin air immediately, but we have to analyze and not to do everything possible to avoid the possibility when those procedures become too painful for the citizens. But if we imagine that the procedure for verification documents for a person is just 1 minute, then the last in this queue will have to wait. If there are 60 persons in the line, will have to wait for the hour. This is something which is not very good. We are going to work more on that. We'll try to to use whatever we can. and to exert all our best efforts in order to simplify or minimize as much as possible the suffering or inconveniences for our countries. Housing. The housing issues are associated with the different tasks, starting with the land allocation, then the construction, and then giving the housing to different citizens according to their place in the queue. So if we speak about only the queue for the citizens who would like to obtain those houses, we are still guided by the procedures established still in the USSR times. So if we can actually add to the previous queue, the queue consisting of the IDPs, then this system again will just be stopped or slowed down. So we are trying to find some mechanisms which will enable us to resolve this problem under the given circumstances. And by the way, this problem is one of the most costly, I would say, for the government, given the present prices for the primary, secondary housing market. And again, we are talking about the huge amounts of funds for the state. We are talking about 20 to 40 billion dollars. We can find this big amount of money in the budget. Even if it were available, we wouldn't be able to resolve this issue or this problem very quickly. Now the floor is given to Natalia Gurzhiy. Good afternoon. I'm going to talk about the problems faced by the asylum seekers and refugees. My colleague already mentioned about that. I would like to talk in more detail about that if I have time for that. One of the big problems in the housing, which unites both the asylum seekers and the refugees, but unfortunately, the situation for the IDPs or the refugees still is even more difficult. Can you imagine a person which managed to reach the peaceful territory, to flee from those dangers, but they do not understand in their country, they do not understand, or they do not know the language, or the traditions, or the habits, and those persons do not understand what's going on. But despite all those difficulties, they have to find some place to live. You know, it's a big wonder for me each time when I encounter such situations. Each time I'm amazed by their courage. They actually do not surrender to those circumstances. They try to make sense of their life, but mostly in those reports they mention that Ukrainian citizens are very kind and they provide the house. And I do not understand how they understand each other, maybe by the language of the body language or gestures, but everybody finds some kind of living space, and this problem is slowly, gradually resolved, to start with their countrymen, then with the Ukrainian citizens, then with some international organizations. But this problem is always like the sword of Damocles is over their heads all the time, you know. And even when they find this housing, they have to keep it all the time because they have to pay monthly sums of money for the housing. You know that in Kiev, the housing space is the cost of that is increasing year in, year out. So this means a lot of work. The work for the job placement is very big, a serious problem for the refugees because not the labor code nor the law on labor protects the refugees. I really would not like to compare those two categories, IDPs and refugees, but IDPs, at least they have the passport of the citizen of Ukraine, and the law on the local population. They guarantee some protection, and the employers give some guarantees to give the jobs. As for the refugees, there are no privileges on the part of the employers. Of course, if the labor market is filled almost to the capacity, of course, the employers will prefer to give jobs, to provide jobs for the Ukrainian citizens or to the IDPs. But there is another category, the asylum seekers. And we are talking about the persons who applied for the protection to be given to them in Ukraine. They are going through the procedure of the establishing their status. And for those purpose, the Ukraine doesn't provide for any social protection for this category of people. We are not talking about any kind of social payments or the support given in case of birth, childbirth, or anything else. And the local legislation gives a chance to find a job, but only temporarily for the period when this document is valid. And the validity of this document is only 6 months, and then it can extend this validity for a month or 3 months. And the employers are not interested, let's say, to extend all the time the period of the contract. And, nobody is interested in doing that, especially if the asylum seeker does not really understand very well Ukrainian language, or they do not understand properly the local habits and traditions. So, in other words, they face a very difficult situation. As for the documents, Ms. Noel mentioned that the asylum seekers know the very good the word, the document, the information, piece of information, or let's say this information document is not a passport, just a piece of paper, which gives you the legal right to stay in the territory of Ukraine. So this person is under the protection of the state, but no other rights are guaranteed by this document. This document is not even the temporary ID document, or it cannot replace the identification code. Actually, you cannot use this document for anything, including the chance to get any job. You know that to get job, you have to show your identification code and your passport, and this paper does not give any of those. And even if the law allows temporary job placement for the period when this document is valid, actually this is not true. So we actually force those asylum seekers to become part of the, let's say, unofficial labor market. And even if they are lucky to be among the 10% of those asylum seekers who are given the necessary status, they still will find a lot of difficulties if you're talking about the labor market or labor exchange, when they could get some subsidies, but those persons did not pay the taxes before that, so they are not eligible to the status of the unemployed person. So if you're talking about this kind of asylum given after 3 or 5 years of this kind of painful procedure, there are some people who actually it took them 12 years to get this kind of the status of the refugee, or no, the asylum, I mean. But anyway, they try to find some kind of the means for subsistence, because without money they cannot live. And I should not even continue. You understand what I'm talking about. And there are other problems associated with their access or no access to medical care. You know that they have the medical assistance is only payable for such, and we understand that even the citizens of Ukraine not always are provided with a free medical aid. But if we're talking about the refugees, we can actually at least protect their rights, but this is impossible to do for the asylum seekers according to the law effective legislation. If it were not for the UN assistance or aid, UNHCR assistance, they would have to actually to work and to get some money for medical care. Then we are talking about the problems associated with the language, education, the business development, or development of business, which, okay, many of the refugees could actually establish their own business or something similar they had in the countries of their respective origin. But first of all, you have to obtain this necessary status, and number two, you have to have some kind of the pillar or the pivot to lean against, because this program does not provide for the refugees integration. They agree that this should be done, and they are working now today to introduce amendments into the law on refugees, which will have another section dedicated to integration. But I'm not going to criticize what has been done already, but we can only hope that our comments will be taken, remarks will be taken into consideration, and this law will be much improved for the benefit of the refugees. But so far, everything is very slow. They do not allocate the funds for the refugees. While a decade ago, I could actually tell the journalists that the only money given by the state to the refugees is a lump sum of 17 hryvnia, and that was really amazing. Now it only you can only cry listening to this sum of money. You can imagine a person waiting for 3 years for this status, and then the government pays this person to start his business or find the housing, 17 hryvnia. This is more than ridiculous. But this is all the money which is allocated by the government for the refugees. Well, there are all other issues. There are the issues of discrimination, which you mentioned before. We are talking about some discrimination associated with the higher education for the refugees. Previously, the law on education, according to the previous law on education, they were equal to the citizens of Ukraine in being eligible to higher education. Now, there are some quotas for the refugees. When we sent the inquiry to the Ministry of Education about that, but they said that they have not actually they decided 100% this issue and resolved this issue. So far, when the situation is not certain, they will have to pay for their education. But anyway, the refugees are really they appreciate the efforts of Ukraine and the citizens of Ukraine for their kind attitude towards them, and I hope that they will stay here, they will be given their status, and they will pay the taxes, develop their businesses, and be useful for Ukraine. And finally, they will be given the Ukrainian citizenship, and they will be among the best of the best in this country. Thank you for your attention. Katerina, thank you. And now the question and answers session. Should you have any questions, please introduce yourself and say who your question is addressed to.
Good afternoon. Zemfira Kontur, representative of international charity Roma organization Romchikli, and I would like to thank UNHCR that they are the organization that included Roma population in the activity and help the population of Roma. And I would like to ask about the problems Roma IDP face, because I heard our colleague about the problems asylum seekers face, the same problems we have, Roma have, because there are Roma who didn't have documents before the war, and now it is difficult for them to get the documents, and there was no registration in order to show that now they can apply for IDP, and can you please deliberate on this issue about Roma?
Thank you for the question, because there are different groups, and I think the Roma is one of the most, the largest and most important of people who face multiple layers of vulnerability. Being displaced for your home, it makes you feel, it makes you vulnerable. You've lost things. Everything is more difficult when you don't have a home, when you don't have your documents, when you don't have a job. And you don't have the people around you who you're used to having, who can help to support you. So being displaced is a major vulnerability. But when you add to it something else, you add to it the fact that you're disabled, you're sick, or you come from an ethnic minority group, then things get very, very tricky indeed. And what we've been very much appreciating the cooperation with the Roma community, because they've helped us to understand the specifics of how the Roma community has been affected by displacement. And one of the main issues that you've raised is the issue of documents. Now, you need a document to do everything, right? You need a document to open a bank account. You need a document to get your social services. You need a document to get a job. And you need a document to register your baby so that you can also receive the benefits associated with that. Now, that's more complicated if you've never had a document. And unfortunately, with many of the Roma who've been displaced as a result of the conflict, many of them have not had documents in the past. And this makes it even more complicated to restore the documents and to make sure that Roma citizens of Ukraine enjoy all of the same rights as all other Ukrainian citizens. And then it takes outreach to bring together host communities that may not have much experience in living together with the Roma population, because integration is a two-way street, and both the displaced and the host communities have to become more accustomed to living with one another. And that requires some cultural adaptation from both sides. And I think that's a process where mediators from civil society have a particular role to play. There's something else I wanted to mention. It just went out of my head. But what we've seen, especially with birth certification, is particularly important. It's important that all children are registered when they're born. This is important so that they enjoy their rights as Ukrainian citizens, so that they don't face any risk of being left stateless at some later point. So this is one of the priorities that we're working on together.
Колеги, чи є ще запитання?
Do you have other questions, please? Good afternoon. I'm the representative of Syrian community in Ukraine. I would like to thank Ukrainian people that they really welcomed us here, and and I believe that Ukraine and Syria, they have one heart. And I would like to thank Ukraine and people of Ukraine for their hospitality. So I would like to thank you for the participation in resolving of problems of Syrian refugees. The main problem is documents, because people, they have documents for 4 or 5 years, and people, they cannot work or get married without the document, so they just stay in the territory of Ukraine. That is what they can do. And about the status, no one got the status of refugee. So this document So the documents that are provided to refugees, they do not allow them to do things in Ukraine, to do business and other things. So So if a person wants to become a citizen of Ukraine, but they are sent the documents that they should leave Ukraine, but there is no embassy, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs didn't provide any guarantees there. Also, we addressed the embassy of Ukraine in Jordan, and no answer. And some people went to Lebanon, and they were not accepted there, and they were not allowed to. They lived in an airport building for a month, and they were said that they should go in other state in order to then become the citizen of Ukraine. So the migration service didn't want to improve the lives of these people, and people want to be officially in Ukraine and to be here. And also there are many documents that a person should have, and it is difficult to find housing, and many people work just to pay for housing. And if charity organizations and the UN won't provide any assistance, then these people just will go hungry because they have money only to pay for the rent. And the program should improve lives to plan ahead, but now we face difficult situation. There are people, they have 2 or 3 children in their family, and some men married Ukrainian girls, and still they do not have the right to live as Ukrainian citizens. So for example, a wife is a citizen of Ukraine, and husband is not. And so there are such problems in this. And for example, a child was born, and this complicates the situation. So they have court trials in order to get citizenship. And in what way can these problems be solved? Is there a plan? Is there a program? How to resolve this issue? We would like to thank you, and I see that Ukraine have problems, a big problem, and it is raised in the EU, and it is really, it influences badly on business and people of Ukraine. But we would like to thank you, we would like to thank Ukrainian people, and we hope that we will have good integration in society and will contribute to Ukraine and to Ukrainian people. Thank you.
Вот. Я бы очень хотела давать вам утешительный ответ, но
I would like to give a satisfactory answer to you, but I am an honest person, and I do not want to confuse you. This is a long way to go. We worked together for more than 30 years in Ukraine in order to improve the quality of refugee assistance. And in the stage we see that this small number of Syrians, you should have the status of refugee without any questions. And in many countries of Europe, this is reality. And but here you do not have this. And I would like that everyone hear your cry and feel your pain. And we continue our work. We try to improve the legislation, and there should be a political will to resolve this issue. And this is not only in the hands of the State Immigration Service, but also the Ministry of Education and Social Policy. So the whole structure should be engaged in this. And it is clear that these organizations have many other problems. And it is difficult to draw attention to the small number of refugees in Ukraine. It's about 300 people, and last year 660 applications for refugee status and 330 applications for refugee status in this half year. And Ukraine should provide better support for this small number of people and to show hospitality that is really present in Ukrainian culture. So we will work together, and I wanted to improve our work and to more closely cooperate with the community leaders, because you have a lot of resources. I do not know about your education, but I have a feeling that you can support us, and jointly we can do better. So I believe that we can support you. We will continue our work. And the question from Urydovy Courier news outlet. So you've said about the problems of IDPs and refugees, but IDP problems, we have more IDPs in Ukraine, and their problems are more pressing. If we go back to the topic announced at the beginning, this is housing and employment for IDPs. So you've said about the problems of housing. There are many people, and housing problems cannot be resolved quickly. We understand that we need 20 to 40 billion of dollars. But do we have some achievements, if you have such a figure about the regions and about the employment and which regions and what professions, any information? So we would like to have an update on the figures, because we know that they are changing, but as of today, what are the figures? So August 2017, about 1.5 million, and this figure is not confirmed by our colleagues from UN, because they have their own system of assessment. And about employment and creation of places of employment, there is a program for this, and the ministry proposed a pilot project. Money that will be provided by our international partners will go to communities in order to create workplaces, in order to have employment for IDPs. The philosophy is like this: the potential that IDPs have, this potential should be used by communities and to generate social capital for the community on the whole. And according to criteria that is proposed by the ministry, to select projects that will be implemented in pilot regions in these programs, special attention is focused on the criteria of the employment of IDPs. And about housing and the number of people who got it, there is no such a program, and it is difficult to follow. Local authority activities, when they, due to their own resources, provide some housing, but we do not have such information. The state doesn't have a program for provision of this. And the pilot project that was proposed and that is provided by our ministry is aimed to create some beneficial crediting, but it is difficult to find money for this. And we have hope that at the legislative level, this task is resolved, and in 2017, we need to find material resources, and then at the end of 2018, we will be able to tell about the number of people who will get this credit. I mean, those people who are IDPs. Next question, please. Lysenko Valeria. And I'm a former IDP from Donetsk Oblast, Yanakieva town. And I would like to say that as of today, I lifted the status because the state didn't provide any assistance to me and the people like me. And we heard about the programs about crediting with low percentage, but we do not have such a thing. And I am disabled, second group, and I didn't get any medical support. And I filed to court against the state in order to be provided with medical procedures, but the state didn't provide any support to me. I do not say about tablets, and I am also a veteran of labor. I still work, continue to work, and I have a flat in Kiev. So we spoke about Roma, about Syrians, and what about disabled? For how long should they wait? These people, do they have time to wait? Because no problem is resolved. There is a wall, and I am a citizen of Ukraine. I am Ukrainian, and I went at the beginning of the event that happened in the Donetsk Oblast, and my children went several months ago. And my daughter-in-law is without job in 1 month until her maternity leave. So we are. So now she filed to the court against the state, and my son is also unemployed. And for me, it is easier to lift all these benefits and statuses because they only create obstacles. Because I get only insults in my country, and I got UN help, and I got help from NGOs, and thanks to my personal contacts, I managed to cope. But the state and the ministries, and I addressed the court, starting regional court and ending the Court of Appeal. And the state didn't provide any excuse. You say you are Syrians, but I am a citizen of the state. And I have a question. And what about disabled? There is such a category of people. For how long should they wait? They do not have time to wait. And they are rejected, and I have documents that testify the status, and they said, come to Ukraine, and we came to Ukraine. They say, move forward. And I went throughout Ukraine and up to Hungarian border, and I addressed everywhere, and they rejected my housing application, and they rejected me in healthcare sector. So I found employment, and there is some employment for disabled that is provided by the state. But we have a lot of problems, and they are really painful. And and for how long the disabled should wait, because they do not have time to wait. So when they are rejected in the most needed things.
It's real difficult to answer anything, to say anything when there is nothing to say, you know. For the simple reason that those problems which exist today in this country, in the social and medical sphere, any other sphere you can imagine, they are enhanced when a person has a status or qualification. The same can be said about Romas, disabled persons, etc., refugees. This is not just, well, roughly speaking, about the disabled or handicapped persons. The matter is that none of the national programs in this country is funded 100% in order which would enable us to resolve this problem immediately. Speaking about our ministry, you can have just talking about what kind of the funds we have available. We can help to pay for the communal services or housing, whatever. We can offer some program, but this program has to be implemented by some other ministry, because we cannot do that ourselves for the lack of finances. And this is the problem, which is a systemic problem when we cannot achieve the situation when there is a ministry for the displaced persons, then all the problems have to be resolved by the ministers according to the simple understanding of the population. But in fact, if we're talking about the social protection or help to find some place in the kindergarten for your small children, there are some bodies in the country's organization which have to resolve such problems. But the IDPs a priori address us with all those problems, and we have to address all other organizations from bottom to the very top. And I can understand your despair and the pain voiced by our co-citizens for the simple reason that today we still do not have understanding that under the conditions that Ukraine is living now, and it is wrong to try to resolve those problems using the levers or the means of the peaceful time. We have to change that and adapt our approach according to the available situation and the crisis we're living through. As you know, the life dictates or shows that many of our colleagues and many of the clerks of different levels, the task is not to understand, not to find the way how to resolve the problem, but how to let's say, to delegate the resolution of this problem to somebody else. Unfortunately, we try to do something about that, somehow try to resolve those problems, but just one ministry is not enough to resolve all the problems faced by the displaced persons. Like the local authorities responsible for the land allocations, or if you're talking about the housing, the housing problem should be resolved by the local authorities. But do you know any local authority which would have the department or the union dealing with the IDPs problems? No. So, but now we have all our previous tasks we had to shoulder, and now we have some additional huge amount of the IDPs in Ukraine, and we try to help them do it. So our task is, or the task is to equally distribute the burden of resolving this problem, for different agencies, bodies, and ministers of Ukraine, which are responsible, first of all, to do that. I cannot promise you that the disabled persons' problems will be resolved very soon. No. All those problems should be resolved at some systemic level. As regards the social protection of medical care, kindergarten, schools, etc., local authorities did a lot. Only there were a few cases when some persons were refused to be provided with let's say with the kindergarten school because there were no more places, so to say, in those kindergarten schools. So please send us your documents We'll try to do something, but there is no no means to resolve the problems. As for the well, I can tell it. We had to deal with some specific cases of some very serious diagnoses, medical diagnoses, but we met with the understanding all the cases, and all the medical officers tried to meet us halfway, and the Hippocrates oath still works, and I'm really proud that we never met with any kind of objection or refusal. If they could not resolve themselves for some understandable reasons, they would actually give us some advice. So let's try to resolve your issue. For 18 months, I was in the court proceedings, judicial proceedings against this country. I tried to prove my being right. Please understand me properly. This is not the way that I wish or do not wish to discuss this problem with you. Let us consider your case. I believe that you were in the judicial procedures versus this country. Any more questions? If none, I would like to know that all the representatives of the refugees and the IDPs, our guests, would continue to give you their comments after this briefing. I would like to thank everybody, and the report of the UN are available in the end of this room on the desk just near the exit to these premises. Thank you and goodbye.